Here's then the question that if compared to the
Yes.
many decades ago where you didn't have to do all of that stuff, you couldn't do. I mean, there was a couple of channels, but not the
Exactly.
myriad of channels you have today. That is driving the cost of sales up very, very high. So it has an inflation effect actually, because prices will go up because somebody will have to kind of incur those costs.
Absolutely.
From an economics perspective, that is kind of a difficult story.
Absolutely.
What's your take on that one?
My
and
take
how
on
do
this
you
is two aspects.
get
One is a lot of times, again, what I'm talking about is pre-COVID, and COVID has changed a lot of things, even in the mind of the customer, right? How many times in the past have we heard, even though the salespeople were saying, and I'm talking about sales, but I'm talking about the sales organization, right? The sales organization would say, we don't need to visit that customer because we've done everything that we can possibly do. But if the customer insists, you go, right? Now, they would go, not necessarily questioning the customer because times were good, right? Now, what if that person had to go tell that customer, if I had to go to Kuhn and say, hey, Kuhn, every time I visit you, right, and it's going to cost me something, right? And guess who's paying for it? It's Kuhn, because at the end of the day, it's going to be reflected in the price that I charge. Now, if we can come up with a way by which I can actually have other ways of letting you know, I will only contact you when there's something of value, right? Now, that has a big impact on cost of sale. But the question is, nobody questioned that before. And COVID made that happen because suddenly, not only was the customer suddenly saying, wait a minute, every time I have to have a meeting face to face, I have to take time away from what I'm doing. And essentially, that's a waste of my time. And there was a famous study done by Walmart that said that an average buyer could spend more time surfing different websites. I mean, if assuming they're buying the same thing again and again, right? They could spend more time on looking at it rather than talk to a person every time, right? So from that, we talk to a salesperson every time. So there's an efficiency there for the client as well. And the client was waking up to find that out, right? Now, of course, there is always one of those things where it went too much to the extreme where they could know. They also now prefer seeing suppliers, but not all suppliers. Only those suppliers who are seen as strategic suppliers. You also saw this move towards vendor reduction. So from the viewpoint of cutting the cost of goods sold, you saw the buyers beginning to rationalize, saying that we can do a lot of things online, right? Similarly, DocuSign. I think DocuSign benefited a lot from COVID because suddenly you could have multi-page documents and you could have customers signing off remotely. I was talking to sales organizations, Kuhn, who would actually say, and I was talking to them in the US. I mean, I have to exaggerate, of course, here, right? And in the US, they would say they would have a salesperson who would actually traverse the length and breadth of Texas, looking for customers, and the amount of gas mileage spent on that, right? Number of kilometers traveled, the number of overnight stays, right? Not to mention the CO2 footprint, because this company was also beginning to talk about that. And we've not even touched upon the sustainability angle right now. And this company was saying, wait a minute, why am I doing all this when the customer is still buying? And what is the cost of this? And now they're actually looking at questioning themselves to say, should we go towards a hybrid? Forget the US. I was talking to another company here doing dental stuff, not implants. They sell machines that are sold to orthodontists in the UK and Ireland. They went from a 5-day, let's meet the orthodontist face-to-face, now to 3 days face-to-face, 2 days from home, and the 2 days they're working from home, they're using AI tools. They use a tool from a company called Allego, which used to be called Refract. Now they're analyzing the conversations that they're having with the customers when they're talking to them and seeing how can we do it better. So you see this happening in terms of the cost of sale beginning. But now, let's say I have all this content, even the marketing's role in having access to these recording content and then seeing how can I then use this to fine-tune my content to make it more effective. You're going to see that happening more and more. A company that I love, and I cannot name the company, but it's a beautiful company. Essentially what they do is that marketing right now works so closely with sales that the salesperson now does not always have to visit the customer. When there is relevant content for the customer. Marketing sends the email on behalf of the salesperson. In fact, it goes out in the name of the salesperson, the key account manager. And if the customer opens, the key account manager knows that it's been customized to that extent. Imagine the cost savings here. And let's also not forget the annoying factor, because one of the most precious commodities for your customer is time. If you can help them save time by not always visiting them, that is also there. So it's a long-winded answer. So there is an awareness, but I think what's going to happen is, because COVID meant that we went the other extreme, for some time we'll go back and say things are going to go back to normal, but they will never go back to normal. You're going to see more and more of these optimization coming up. And I know that you work a lot with things like account-based marketing and things like that. I've always seen the potential of account-based marketing, not just with new acquisition, but also with keeping my customers happy without the salesperson always visiting them as well. So you need that, in my opinion, companies that have taken a look at it. And here is where companies in B2B, hardcore B2B, they do plan on having sales ops functions. So remember CRO, but they have sales ops functions saying, where are my salespeople visiting? How many of them are actually visiting? What is the quality of the visits? So you see that happening now, the question around costs, right? And now the question is, if the salesperson are not visiting, how are we going to keep the customers with that information that they want? And that's where I think marketing is going to play a role.